Hi everyone, and welcome to ODTUG's online education series. Today's presentation is Why Your Monitoring Tools Aren't Enough to Manage Hyperion, presented by Ed DeLise of Datavail. This presentation will be recorded and available for viewing on the ODTUG website within a couple of days. So feel free to put your questions into the questions box at any time during the presentation, and they'll be addressed either during the presentation itself or during the Q&A period at the end. So welcome, Ed, and thank you for being here today.
Great, Karen, thank you very much. I will go ahead and get started. As Karen mentioned, my name is Ed DeLise. I am the VP of Application Performance Management here at Datavail. I've been in the Hyperion world for about 18 years. I began working with Hyperion back in about 2000, working for them directly here in Atlanta where I live. Then I was with Upstream Software, which if you're familiar with FDM, that's where that came from originally, until we were acquired by Hyperion. I was the former VP of Solutions Principal at Accelitus, which is a software company that was acquired by Datavail back in July. And I was involved in building Hyperion performance management solutions at Accelitus. I have a bachelor's in both accounting and finance from Texas A&M. Right when Hyperion was acquired by Oracle, I became involved with the user group community at that time and was the founder of the Hyperion SIG and was the president for 3 years at that time. And when I'm not doing all this Hyperion stuff, I'm also the father of 9 kids. So to start off with, who is Datavail? Just to give you a brief background, Datavail has been in business for 13 years. We have over 1,000 employees and 700 customers. We began as a database managed services company, but have expanded significantly into all things related to data, which includes managed services, as well as consulting services and other ETL services for a very wide variety of applications and technologies. And in addition to having, the people and the processes around, what we do for the various deliverables for our customers, everything we do is IP enabled. Everything is tech enabled. So that means in addition to having people that really understand the technologies and how to make them work best to make our customers happy, they have the ability to do things faster and be much more efficient and effective by having this tech enablement as part of the deliverable. And when it comes specifically to Hyperion, we have 2 main areas. We have the project services, which is going to be EPM consulting. So you got performance testing, upgrades, consulting, migrations to the cloud, training, things such as that. And then we have 24/7 managed services. And the same concept goes here as we do for everything else. It's all tech enabled. So we have software that helps the teams do their jobs much more effectively, giving very, very high ratings for our customer satisfaction. So that's a little bit of background about Datavail. So now we're going to get into the presentation. Again, it's about why your monitoring tools aren't enough to manage Oracle Hyperion, what else you need and how to get it, okay? So the gist behind this is, every company out there has monitoring tools in place to some degree. Some standardize on one or a few. Others, they're all part of the management process for technology, right? All applications are being monitored to some degree. But when it comes to having the visibility and control you need for Oracle Hyperion, it's just not enough. And so what we're going to do is explain why it's not enough and what you actually need. So we'll first define the APM challenge, and then go over a little bit about the generic monitoring tools, some of the common tools and some of the limitations, and then we'll get into a little more detail about what else you need. Why are monitoring tools not enough? What are the other things that you need? And then I'll briefly touch on the Accelitus Performance Management Suite. So to start off with, we'll define what the challenge is. First off, there are many moving parts when it comes to the Oracle Hyperion world. You have multiple environments, right? So you got production, development, QA, test, DR, and then there's multiple different products, right? So within a single environment, which this is what this represents, you're going to have multiple different layers. And within each of these layers, you have different things that can go wrong at these various intersections, right? And people who are responsible both on the IT and the finance side to administer the systems are acutely aware of these various things. And so you take, this is one environment, you multiply this out by however many environments you have, and then by whatever mix of applications that you happen to have from Oracle Hyperion, and you have something that's actually quite complex. This is actually a real client diagram for only one application for only one environment. So you can imagine you take this and extrapolate that out. I'm sure many of the folks here on this call have environments that are this complex or maybe more complex. So that's the many moving parts component of this. The second piece that makes the application performance management challenge a challenge is that you have many teams that are trying to work together. So you start off with the application administrators. So you have your primary administrators and then level 1, 2, level 3 support. Then you have the IT group, as you know, database, network, infrastructure teams. Then you have product support directly from the vendor, right? So Oracle Help Desk, and then the development teams. You have management levels involved, both in IT and finance, and then also Oracle. You have the users, both in finance and IT. And then most people have some level of outsourced IT as well. So what ends up happening is between all of these different groups, whenever challenges arise, there's just a lot of finger pointing. Was it me? Was it you? Did you change something? And you got to have a lot of proving and disproving and a lot of time it takes to try to get to resolutions just because of the nature of so many groups trying to work together. And then within those groups, there's a lot of details that you need to understand what's going on. So there's component health that you need to deal with, log information, information about activity and performance, configuration information about the environment and the applications, key performance indicators, information about the data and the applications themselves, right? So it takes experts who understand where to look for, what you need to look for, and where to find these things, and then what do they mean and what should you do about it? So the details are a big component of this. And the whole reason behind all of the existence of all this, the applications and the environments is because you have a lot of users who have a lot of critical deadlines. So you have all levels within the organization, right? All the way up to the CFO, the CEO, and even the board that are trying to deal with information that's needed to make decisions, and also for regulatory things, right? Like filing your 10Ks and your 10Qs. So very stressful situation. So what happens, to conclude what the APM challenge is, moving parts, teams, details, and a lot of users, and it ends up being a very stressful situation for everybody involved. So what typically you see is there's generic monitoring tools in place. You say, well, I'm using that to help manage the performance. So what kind of things do you typically see? Well, there's OEM, which is Oracle Enterprise Manager, IBM has Tivoli, there's SolarWinds Dynatrace, HP has OpenView, there's Microsoft SCOM, and there's New Relic, right? So what happens is you get mixed signals with these tools. They indicate services are up and running, and all seems to be fine, right? So a lot of times you get basically a false negative, everything is fine. So what ends up happening is the end users, though, they're actually experiencing slowness or they can't access the applications. And this is because there's something at a more granular level than the generic tools are monitoring for that's wrong, but they can't see that. So then what ends up happening is the end users have to inform the IT and the finance support teams of the issues, right? So then, so everything ends up being reactive, right? They're waiting for a phone call, and then once that happens, you have to jump into action. And then the support teams don't have enough information or the ability to do effective root cause analysis because the information simply isn't there to be found. Or if it is there, it's somewhere very deep that's difficult and time consuming to get to. So what ends up happening is the productivity of the end users is impacted, in addition to the productivity of the support teams trying to resolve these things, and the risk of missing these critical deadlines increases. So in addition to the monitoring tools I mentioned, there's other common point solutions, right? So you have like Cognos Command Center, which is out there for automation. That's formerly Star Analytics. You have LoadRunner, is a very standard tool for performance testing. Splunk for log management. There's What's Up Gold for log management. And there's things like Windows Scheduler for automation. So these are also additional tools that are typically in the mix for clients, in addition to the monitoring tools that can potentially help with some of these things. But the big three limitations of this entire mix of the generic tools is that everyone's receiving is reactive. They're receiving after the fact notifications. It's not until a problem arises that then you're alerted to it. And then you have to try to make the tools you have possibly work together to try to get to a resolution. There's typically not enough detail to understand the root causes of Oracle Hyperion challenges. These are typically down at a detail level that's just below what these other tools were designed to do. And there's really no capabilities to perform other routine functions that are just necessary to manage Oracle Hyperion, which we'll get into in just a minute. So what else do you need? You need deeper insight and you need more control into all these moving parts, right, to help the teams work together more efficiently and effectively. So the first thing you need is a consolidated view of all the environment and application settings. Without the ability to have everything in one place to see, you have to have very highly specialized experts to find this information to make performance decisions. They have to know where to look in the application, where to look in the environment to bring information up. And they have to do it on a one-off by remote desktoping into each machine individually. You have to make manual updates on each machine and each environment for performance tuning, which is time-consuming and error-prone, as I'm sure many of the folks on the team, if you've ever gone through that, you know this firsthand. And then the environment can get out of sync. So then that ends up causing these mysterious performance challenges that take excessive time to try to identify and correct. And people say it's like a needle in a haystack, right? It's like, why does it work just fine in dev, but when I try to do the same thing in production, I'm getting a different result? These two environments are supposed to be identical. But with so many settings between the environments and the applications, it's not easy to try to understand what that difference might be. So with the ability to do this, more administrators can help to support the systems without specialized knowledge. So when you have a consistent, consolidated view to see all application settings for planning, SBase, HFM, OBIEE, the environment, you don't have to know all the details of each one of those to try to find those things. It's all at your fingertips. So you can have more effective administrators. Tuning updates and other system controls can be executed quickly. So if you go to one place, make a change, push it out to all the different servers, it's much more efficient than going in and having to rekey that information multiple different times. The environments can stay in sync with less effort, especially by being able to compare the differences between those. And if you identify one, you can obviously address that. So the other thing you need is centralized log management. If you don't have centralized log management, once again, it requires highly specialized experts to be able to find the logs, understand the various formats that you're looking at, attempt to extract meaningful information, analyze those results, and then come to a conclusion, right? Logs have to be manually archived to avoid excess growth, which can impact performance. And it's just very difficult to perform effective and efficient root cause analysis because it takes so much time to be able to go back and dig through that information. So with the ability to manage all of your logs centrally, right, seeing everything in a single place regardless of the application, the meaningful information is available for rapid analysis for a wider team, right? It doesn't take the expert to go find that log because they're the only ones that know how. More people can look at this information. You can auto-archive information to ensure you don't have performance impact from excessive log growth. And the root cause analysis, when challenges do arise, can be performed much more rapidly. So the other thing you need for deeper insight and more control is automation of system and application tasks. Without the automation capability, manual process is going to require scarce administrator resources to execute. The manual process is going to result in unnecessary errors from human intervention. And then the remediation of error conditions requires human intervention 24/7 to keep things running. If you have automation that's set up and it's working properly, you have a more efficient use of administrator resources, and you could have an elimination of errors. And I mentioned if you do it properly. I've seen automation situations where people have automation in place, but what happens is when an automation routine fails, if there's not the proper conditional setting in there for it to then take an action such as notify someone, then the administrators have to go back and find out later that something failed on the automation and then remediate that. So it's like, well, it would have been easier to just do it automatically in the first place. So it's important that the automation capabilities are actually reliable. And then automated remediation of predefined error conditions 24/7 can provide faster hands-off resolution. So if a certain thing happens, we know if we get a slowdown in financial reports, every time what ends up happening is the service needs to be restarted. Well, if you can define that, then you can actually have that automation kick in, remediate the error, check that it was remediated properly, and then notify the error users that it was done. So that's automating system and application tasks. The other thing you need is proactive and ongoing performance testing. So without continuous testing, you basically have reactive management. So you wait for something to happen, and then it's all hands on deck, right? Back to the slide there with everybody, all the different groups working together. They have to all get involved and start to understand what happened. The users end up informing the administrators of performance issues. Problems have to be addressed during production time, right? So it always happens at the worst time of the month when you're trying to do either the close process or a financial planning or budgeting forecasting process, something like that. So when you're right when the deadlines are looming. Then the impact of changes that were made to the last environment or application since the last heavy usage period. So let's say you did some patch updates, Windows updates, or other changes to the applications since your last heavy usage period. You're not going to know about if those had an impact on performance until the next time you have a large group of users, if you don't do testing ahead of time, right? Because your testing is going to be live in your production environment. So if you do have proactive and ongoing testing, you have proactive management. So you're going to find out about issues when you compare your baseline performance to tests. Understand if the result is different. Say, hey, this wasn't the performance I was expecting based on the baseline we had established. Now you have time to look into that before the users actually touch the system. And you also reduce the likelihood of missing deadlines because now you've dealt with all the potential performance issues ahead of time, not during the close process or the forecasting process. The other thing you need to do is be able to correlate environment, application, and user activities. So to really understand the cause and effect between things going on in the environment, which is going to be the responsibility of an infrastructure or a hardware group, compared to the applications, right, which is going to be typically finance administrators who might be updating metadata, changing rules, forms, reports, and then the things that users do on a regular basis, consolidating, pulling smart view reports, doing other kind of retrieves such as that. Without that ability, it's very difficult and time-consuming to attempt to determine the root cause. Was it something in the environment, something in the application, something the user did? It's an inefficient use of expensive resources that only work with the part of the puzzle that they can see to try to manage performance. And once again, it increases the risk of performance disruptions and missing deadlines. So if you do have the ability to see the cause and effect between these, you can do much faster root cause analysis. You can have a much more efficient allocation of resources, and you have the opportunity to identify and train users on best practices to negate the performance impact of their actions. So for instance, you have a very large smart view retrieve. It's 20 tabs, and every time that the person runs that, they probably have no idea that they can potentially impact the performance for everybody. They think, well, hey, I'm just running a report. How could I possibly do that? But with the training, you can help them say, do you really need all 20 of those tabs, or could we narrow that down to just 5? And then maybe you only run the larger report on a infrequent basis. You don't need to do that every single time. The other thing is tracking environment and application changes. If you are not able to track these things, it's difficult to produce rapid audit reports for SOX compliance to prove what changes were made in the system. So everybody typically has change control processes in place. You have to have certain approvals that are in place before a change can be made. But what happens is that's fine to have the approval process, but to be able to prove out was what changed truly what was approved, or did anything change that wasn't approved? That's more difficult, right? So you have to actually see the changes in the system. So it's difficult to produce audit reports around that. And it's also difficult to do root cause analysis. If you don't know what changed, to investigate what may be the root cause of a problem. So for instance, your performance was fine yesterday. All of a sudden today, everyone's having a difficult time getting their reports run. The first thing everybody asks is what changed? Well, if you can't tell for a fact, then it's a bunch of guesswork. But if you can go back and say, you know what, someone changed this rule. Someone changed this metadata. Could that possibly be the root cause? So they have a chance to start to investigate that. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but at least you have a starting point. So with the ability to track changes, faster, more accurate SOX compliance, and faster root cause analysis by investigating these things. And then lastly, the thing you need for deeper insight, more control, is the ability to optimize slow HFM consolidation times. Right? If you can't do that, you could have potential bottlenecks in your HFM rules that can impact the performance of consolidation times. Some consolidations are fast, and this is not important. If you're 5 or 10 minutes, no big deal. Some consolidations, depending on the complexity and the size of the rules file, I mean, you're talking hours and hours. And obviously that has to be run multiple different times during the close process. So the monthly, quarterly close processes can take longer. If you have the ability to identify where the bottlenecks are, you can improve your consolidation times by surfacing the inefficiencies, reduce the time for the close process, and you can maintain consistent performance period after period. So that's the capability, again, capabilities needed above and beyond generic monitoring, which is traditionally what people have in place. So to just briefly explain, the Excellitis Performance Management Suite is the only software platform that unifies and controls your entire Hyperion stack. So it was designed from the ground up to support HFM, planning, SBase, OBIEE, all the applications. And it was built with all of the functionality that you see here in a single product. So what ends up happening is you have the depth to understand the application and the user activity for these Hyperion applications. And you also have the functionality across all of this working together, as opposed to having individual products from different vendors that you're trying to have talk to each other and to maintain, and to also get down into the depth of the Hyperion applications. To kind of give you a comparison on the platform, this is the functionality that we just reviewed, right? The things that you need to understand to be able to have the reactive monitoring, proactive monitoring, where you're actually going out there and doing ongoing testing, the logs, managing the environment, tracking changes, the performance testing, and optimization and automation. All of that, if you compare generic monitoring tools, are going to get full capability when it comes to reactive monitoring across your environment. Okay, that's what they're designed to do. When you look at the point solutions we reviewed, they're going to, for the environment, log management, performance testing, such as load runner, automation capabilities, they're going to be fully functional. Then when you start to get the next level of detail into the Hyperion applications, they're not going to be as specialized to give you all the log management capabilities, not going to always work for performance testing, and the same for automation. They don't work as smoothly as they will for generic things like for the environment. And they're not going to have any capabilities, any of these tools around the monitoring, either reactive or proactive, managing the environment, tracking changes. Then when you get down to the user activity, right? So what activities are the users actually doing? There isn't any trace of any of the generic tools, the monitoring tools, or the point solutions where they play in this area. So once again, the idea behind the Excellitis platform is you play at all levels of detail for all levels of functionality. So the limitations are, these aren't designed to work together, right? They're all individual products from individual vendors. They're not designed to work with Oracle Hyperion specifically, would require significant customization to get down to that level. And then it would, and in addition to having them, work together, even if you did that development effort one time, then you're going to be taking on the ongoing maintenance to attempt to make the functionality and the depth work, as there's new versions, updates for each of these products. So once again, all the functionality is in a single platform built from the ground up to work together. It's used by over 100 Oracle Hyperion clients to manage performance. It's been in production since 2008. And it also has this flexibility to work with many other products beyond Oracle Hyperion, which is kind of outside the scope of this discussion. But just to make the point, it's not limited to Oracle Hyperion. So just to summarize the discussion today, Oracle Hyperion has many moving parts, requires timely coordination between many teams to manage performance. The monitoring tools that are leveraged for other technologies don't provide the details necessary. And the APM platform has a 10-year history of solving this problem for clients who consider Oracle Hyperion to be mission critical. So that's all I have. I'm going to check here to see if there's any questions that might have popped up during the discussion. And I'm not seeing any right now. And I wanted to also mention, if you have any, if you want to type them in there, I'll be glad to answer them. And I also wanted to mention we're going to be at CaseScope in Orlando, which is going to be just over a month away. We're also sponsoring the 5K fun run. If anybody's going to be doing that, I'm hoping I'll be in shape to do that as well. That's been fun every year. And if there isn't anything else, thanks for joining today. As Karen mentioned, this will be recorded, and I'll turn it over back to Karen.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And thanks, Ed, for being with us today. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.